All right, welcome back to yet another episode of This and That with Ola and Jazz. Ola, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing great. I love that bookshelf behind you, man.
I know it
So
is.
good.
It's totally my actual background, and that is exactly what the room looks like where I'm sitting.
Dude, you won't believe this blurry thing that you see. That's how my background is. I had it painted so it looks blurry in
Oh,
real life. When you go here, you're like cross-eyed.
all right.
so, so I heard that you were playing with GitHub with a code project, and you had some interesting requirements come of like things you wanted done, and we're gonna explore that today.
Yes, I thought I talk to you a bit about trying to uh, automate the generation of documentation. Every developer's favorite thing to do. And I was tooling around, writing some code, and utilizing GitHub. And I was trying to figure out a way of um, just getting comments out of code and be able to generate documentation and automate that. So every time you check in your code, it grabs the comments and then it generates documentation somewhere. And you can do that to some extent in just GitHub itself. But I wanted to be able to generate documentation where you had a bit more control over how it looks, and also be able to add some collaboration around the documentation. So when you create an API, you generate documentation, people can browse the documentation, then also add comments and ask for like API documentation change requests, etc. And I remember that you showed me using Coda, which I thought was pretty cool. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, a bit about using Coda and see if we could get stuff in GitHub to output other stuff in Coda.
Totally. And Coda is the perfect platform for those of you who haven't heard about it. It's an all-in-one, kind of like Google Suite, G Suite, like docs and spreadsheets and presentations, all mixed into one thing called a Coda doc, which can also allow you to create tables and databases and link them up and have like cool actions and triggers and all of those things all in one place, and which is all the rage. Coda competes with things like Notion, and there's a few others like that, which is like an all-in-one workspace. You don't have to go outside, and you don't have to use multiple apps. Everything is just available to you at the cursor, whatever you want inside a doc. And yeah, Ola, I think Coda would be great for this because Coda has an API, and it allows for things to be sent to it into Coda docs as part of some sort of a workflow. And Coda can also be the source of a trigger, so things happen elsewhere on the internet. And given that this is 2021, I figured that we compare and contrast a few different ways of doing this, including a couple of no-code ways, because that's all the rage these days. You don't write any code, you just drag and drop, and you use things like Zapier or Power Automate to hook up and create workflows that span multiple applications, right? So that would be like the no-code way. And so I figured I'd create, upon your request, I created this Coda document, which I'll share in just a moment, in which we take a look at a couple of no-code ways of just creating a simple prototype, just to see if the connection works, right? From GitHub to Coda, like when there's a commit happening on GitHub's side, can Coda be notified, and can that information or any metadata about that commit be put in a table of some sort? So I was able to do it in two ways without writing any code there, and we'll talk about limitations and the pros and cons of that, including the costs. And then I believe you have a third way, which is actually the more of the hardcore way of doing that, right?
Yes, I did tool around for a bit and built like a very simple, just proof of concept. Again, similar to what you did, just checking to see if can we get activity in GitHub to be sending stuff out into to Coda, and what type of information can you get. And ultimately, we want to be able to parse out the comments right out of the source code that gets checked in. So that's where we want to get to. But I wanted to start off just checking to see, hey, how do we go about reacting to somebody checking in code and then getting some metadata and then putting that into Coda. That's kind of where we're starting off at. And I have an example of that.
Awesome. So I think we could just start by taking a quick look at just a sample Coda document to see what it's all about. And then we have a document created where we have tried these three ways, the two no-code ways and Ola's through GitHub Actions way in one place. And then we'll talk about each of them one after another. So let me share my screen and we'll get going. Okay. All right, so this is, Coda is essentially, once you sign into Coda, it's an all-in-one workspace. And so when you go into one of these and you create a document, for example, create a new doc right here. And in here, these are all the templates. I could start with a blank page just to show you what's up. And so this is a demo blank page. So this is like a Google Doc, and I can go in here, and typically when you start with a slash, that's a way of triggering a command where you can go in and insert all sorts of things, including checklists, images, your standard stylized text like headings and paragraphs and other things, tables, and then you have all of these things. But one of the things that's very popular is to actually, besides the actual content, is to put in there's my cat creating a lot of ruckus in the background, is to put in tables. So you can put in a table like this, and this is an actual database where you have multiple columns with, acts like a database, and you can have multiple tables and various different views of that same table surfacing all over your workspace and showing up in your content. So here's, that was just to show you, here's one templatized document, this is a document, feels like a wiki, but it's like a starting point to meeting notes. So when you go in there, you can see there's a action items table followed by expandable sections where you have just various topics, based on dates and such. You have checkboxes. So that's one of the things. You've also got stand-up section where you're storing information about the stand-ups, and so pulse check, voting. So you'll see that these are like Google Docs, but really emphasizing that you have control of like creating data. So you don't have to go into Google Sheets. So that's the huge thing.
That was the cool thing, that when you showed me this the first time, is how you have this sort of relational database inside of a doc, and the flexibility, and it's just so, I was trying to kind of think of like a way of describing it, and it's like so fluid, everything. It just becomes so it removes a lot of barriers for collecting information, and adding not just separate sort of silos of data, but adding relationships between the data, like we would have in a relational database. So there's a lot of cool stuff in Coda, and
a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, a lot of very neat stuff.
And just for those of you who's like, wait, what about Notion? Well, so in case you've heard, Notion is the other competitor in this space, and they're amazing. They're at the forefront of this because Notion or at least they're more popular, it seems, in my bubble here. Everyone uses Notion for creating docs with tables and data in it. We're still waiting for the Notion to release their API publicly, because then you can do the kind of things we're going to do with our GitHub demos. So eagerly awaiting, and as soon as it's come out, maybe we'll do another one, which is like a Notion version of it. Yeah.
So your bubble, is that made up of you and your cat?
My bubble is me and my cat, and she uses Notion, and I'm a Coda guy.
Okay.
So let's check this out. So here it is, talking about the no-code ways of doing this. So this is, we created this demo, just put in some random background image. There's Ola's cursor right there. So what we have here, I'll just scroll slowly, is I created a no-code workflow to get GitHub commits data into this document, into this very specific one table that we have here called GitHub commit history table, using Zapier. So we'll talk about that in just a second. That's like a third-party tool that connects and allows you to create workflows over the web. Then Coda itself has a built-in GitHub block that we can use, which is this other integration tool that's built into it. So this is also, doesn't require code. And then finally, Ola is going to take us through the GitHub Actions way of doing this, directly talking to Coda API. So that requires a little coding, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. So real quick, the Zapier workflow. So for those of you who don't know, Zaps are essentially a way of creating if this then that kind of workflows, where you can have a trigger that could be any app out there as long as it supports Zaps, and any event happening in that. So for example, Zapier supports GitHub as a connector. So what I can do is, once I log into GitHub or give Zapier the permissions, it can track any repository I want, and anytime there's a commit, use that as a trigger to start this very particular workflow that I've created. So I actually went in there before this recording, hooked it up to my GitHub account, and then set up a trigger, which is I have this random GitHub repository called Coda test, where I was just uploading a bunch of committing and pushing some files in there. And so the trigger was in the main branch of GitHub. And the trigger was basically anytime there was a commit happening, which is the name of the trigger. So anytime you commit something, this trigger will start, and it will start the process. And by starting the process, what it does is it collects all the information about that trigger. So it has all the metadata you could possibly imagine that Zapier already has. It's gotten it. Now it's totally up to you what you want to do with this data. You can have, in my case, I basically go into Coda. I say, hey, use Coda, use my Coda account, and then go ahead and create a row inside a table. And
this is a pre-bit. This is a SAP, right? That's what it's called, a SAP that's provided by Coda to Zapier.
Exactly. So Zapier. I don't know who does this, but Zapier has, like, it's in its best interest to have support as many apps as possible.
Yeah.
So a lot of times for the up and coming or big apps, Zapier will go ahead and build these hooks and Zaps integrations for these apps. But sometimes if you're a small player, you're building an app, you might have to go and do this yourself. So Zapier allows you to actually build your own integrations. So it's pretty simple. I just set up the action where I say, hey, go into the Monday test document, which, I used to call this Monday test. I renamed it to GitHub test, but it's the same document.
Yeah.
Because it did this surprise on a Monday. Yeah. So the table that I want to commit, put this in is GitHub commit history table, which is this guy right here. This table. So the cool thing is that when you're doing this, Zapier automatically shows you all the possible tables in this document. Or if you click on the drop down, all the possible documents. So you don't have to find the identifier or any of that. It's just all here. And then you say, okay, well, Zapier notices that this table that I've created here has 3 columns, and I've given them particular names. So it literally gives me 3 boxes where I have to fill in, like, what kind of information from the trigger section do I want to plug into these 3 columns.
That's cool.
So I think the hash was like the unique identifier of the commit. So I just created one, the commit message, and who's the person who committed. And Zapier lets you actually, if you have some commits already, it'll go in and look at it, and it'll put in sample data so you can see how that feels like.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And then I can test the action by turning on, I can literally just go in and retest the action, and it'll add another item in it. And that's it. Now, here's the thing. Zapier requires, I think you get like 100 free zaps with the free account. For any more, you'll have to pay them money. And this is separate from what you might pay Coda for their functionalities, right? Yeah. So zaps are awesome for anything. So that was the, that's the first.
We're using for Coda, we're using the free version of Coda, right?
We are. It's a completely free version of Coda. It comes with limitations, but as you can see, this is not that limiting. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
The downside with the Zapier workflow is because I ran out of my free zaps.
Yeah.
This is not going to work until I just retest my actions, but that's okay. Yeah. You only get 100 a month, so I think I used up 100 like a long time ago.
And
yeah.
So they give you some for free to get you hooked, and then you got to pay for it.
That's how the world works. Yes. So that's the Zapier workflow. Doesn't require any code. You got to set up your table on the left, like on the Coda side, go into Zapier, and then use GitHub as trigger and Coda as the target. Yeah. And you're good to go.
Right. And I just want to point out again that the the ultimate final thing that we're trying to do here is to generate documentation. So this in itself is just proof of concept to see if we can get the things to talk to each other.
Exactly. Yeah, just a proof of concept to see if we can have these connected, talk to each other. And we'll discuss, because some of these might be dead ends. Some of these might be actually potential for the actual thing that we want to create. So the second no code option is Coda itself has a set of built-in blocks. These are called Coda blocks. So what I did was I actually went ahead and inserted a Coda GitHub block. That's literally, it's as simple as that, which inserts this section here. Looks like a table, but it's slightly different from a normal Coda table that you see right here. So the Zapier workflow is just sending data into the normal table. Here, this is not a table. This is a block object, which looks like a table. So works slightly differently, which means that the repercussions is programmatically, you might not be able to access the data in here as a table. So there's downsides there. But the best part is this doesn't require Zapier. It just works out of the box. Like I just inserted the block, and I just specified the account, the URL for the repo, and what columns I wanted. And the columns that I want here, you can see these are all the various different columns. You can add more columns, and these are some of the options. So this is the commit data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different fields that come out of that commit, right? So it's limited in the data it gets from the commit.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. Whereas in Zapier, as you saw,
it has more
set up
metadata.
The action. Yeah, exactly. Like Zapier integration, choose an account, choose an app and event. Oh no, sorry, this one. Set up trigger. See, you get all of this data. This is all like, looks like JavaScript object notation probably behind the scenes. So there's a lot more metadata if you go the Zapier route versus
it looks like a big old JSON object. Yeah,
exactly. Versus here, it's just more of 6 or 7 different options you get, right?
Yeah.
So I already know that this second one, even though it's easy and it's free, doesn't require Zapier, you don't have to pay for them.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not
not
going to
gonna
get you
work.
to our destination at least.
Yeah.
But hey, it's free, and there's other blocks like this on Coda, like built-in integration that allow you to bring in data without having to use Zapier.
Yeah.
One more limitation here is that unless you're a paid Coda subscriber, this doesn't sync automatically either. So you have to go in and press this refresh button.
Yeah.
So true automation comes at a price here.
Yes.
Right. So that's there's that. And last but not the least, now, Ola, you want to take it away? I'll stop sharing. You want to share your screen if you want?
Yes, I will.
Let's talk about GitHub Actions.
Screen.
What in the world is GitHub Actions? And
so I, having worked with not GitHub but Git on your local machine,
the protocol,
yeah, installing just Git on your local machine and creating local repositories. I knew that Git has something called hooks, and hooks are ways of reacting to stuff when you log in, when you check in on your local machine, and then these hooks can kick off and they can run scripts and they can do stuff, right? So I was thinking, okay, I knew about that. I played around. I never really used it, but I knew that existed. So I was thinking, I wonder if there is something in GitHub that can do this as well. And I started to do a little bit of research, and I came across what's called Actions. And this is a relatively new, both to me and I think to most of the world, feature in GitHub. I think it went, it RTM'd like last November, something like that. So relatively new thing. And
wow, that is pretty new.
I figured out that this is something that can listen for things that happens in GitHub when you pull requests, checking things in, etc. And then you can add some logic to those events. And I was thinking, all right, let's see if we can use this to listen for. I just started with when things gets checked in, and see if we can send things over to Coda.
So
here, go ahead.
One question. So so what you're saying is Git has the facility so that when you commit, you can trigger a bunch of things locally.
Yes.
And same ways online GitHub, when you push your local repository here, there's actions that can happen at a SaaS level.
Yes, exactly. And hooks and actions are not at all the same thing. The only thing they have in common is that they can get triggered and do things. But the way that actions work, which I get to in just a minute, it's going to be very different from hooks. So, all right. So I created this workspace, Supreme Octa Fiesta.
I was going to say, quite a name. I props to you, my friend.
That is, I didn't come up with the name. It's in GitHub, it can suggest names for your workspace. So I just picked one of those. So this is a special place where GitHub Actions meets Coda.io. And what I also needed to figure out is, how do I access Coda? So as you mentioned earlier, Coda has an API. So this is why we thought about using Coda versus some of the other solutions out there. So Coda has an API, and I started to browse around, and it's a good API if you've done any used any other type of REST-based RESTful API. It's this works pretty much the same way. And it has the ability to interact with whatever it is that you do in Coda. And specifically here, what I was interested in is this section where it talks about interacting with tables, right? So this is where I started to browse around, and after a while, I came across here. We can go down, and we have the ability here to work with rows. And specifically, what I wanted to do is I wanted to insert a row.
I see.
And we have examples here. If you're over on the right-hand side, there's various different examples using Python, and there's curl commands and a few other ways of interacting with the API. So I thought, all right, we got actions, we got an API. The other thing that I also needed is an API key, something that I sent to Coda to say, hey, I have the right to do this, to insert data or whatever. So I went into my Coda account, and there is a section in there, if you go into your account settings, to generate an API token.
Gotcha.
So I did that.
And for the record, this is something I had to generate so that, because Zapier asked for it too.
Yes, it probably asked for the same thing, right? Yes.
Yeah.
And again, we're using the free account, so this is available in the free account. So we have an API, we have an API token, we have a GitHub workspace, we have this thing called actions, and I was now starting to kind of assemble all of these pieces together. So the way that actions work is it's phenomenal. I mean, I was kind of blown away, the functionality, and like once I figured out how it actually works and what it does, it's spectacular. So it is the ability for you to create a continuous integration, continuous deployment workflow, where you define steps, and you do this inside of a YAML file.
What's a YAML file?
So a YAML file is a file that contains YAML, which is
markup.
Which is what we're looking at here. It's a markup language, so it's relatively common in configurations, and the ability to describe steps that should be executed in a certain order. If you deal with dealing with like Docker images, Kubernetes, these are all typically using YAML files to describe configurations. Lots of other continuous integration tools, continuous deployment tools use YAML to describe what should happen when we deploy. Azure DevOps uses the same thing. So I figured out that, all right, so in order for this to work, I need to create a YAML file. And once you get in here to add, and by the way, I'm using a free GitHub account, so this is not something that I'm paying for. It's part of the free account. So inside of here, we can go in. Let me go back here. I can go into actions, and I can create a workflow. And it gives me a number of templates that I can work with. So you can see that there's a bunch of different templates that I can kind of
these are like
out
of the box. You don't have to even write that much code, like not much YAML to get it going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
So I picked just the very basic template. That was kind of my starting point.
Gotcha.
And this right here, this is what the editor looks like. And the editor, I don't know if it's just my browser being goofy or what it is, but the editor is a little, I'm going to zoom in a bit. It's a little like it doesn't scroll all the way down. Like if I have files, lines down here, I struggle a little bit with the editor. But anyways, that's for a different
day.
Different day, yes.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's okay. I wish that I could like get rid of this thing on the right and make a bit more space. But anyway.
So, and just to be clear, this YAML file is not part of your Git repository itself, is it?
Oh, it is. Yes.
It is. So you
so
could do it locally and then just push it.
um, sorry.
Oh
So
yeah, .github/workflows.
yeah, it's right in here. It's .github workflows. I mean, I guess I could. Yes, I mean it's a file. Absolutely, I could do it locally if I wanted to. The nice thing I should say about the online editor is that it gives you some IntelliSense, and it
Oh,
helps you
nice.
out. Yeah, it's not just like a fancy text box. It does help you out, and it validates your YAML. So maybe I was too harsh on it at first here, but yeah, I could certainly have done this in VS Code or something locally, but
Gotcha.
it's right there. There's the YAML file, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anywho,
And this is the actual YAML file that led to that table we saw at the bottom.
yeah, absolutely. Yep, it's all in here. So
do you want to zoom in a little?
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead here and zoom in again. So so here is the the thing that I figured out, and that is this YAML file. What it's going to do is it's going to describe a bunch of steps. So each step is responsible for doing something. Hey, let's listen for checked in files. Let's get the comments out of the file. Let's connect to Coda. Let's push out the whatever comments that we extracted into a Coda doc or whatever you want to do. Like all of these individual steps are described inside of here. And the way this works is that this is going to run on a Linux box. So this workflow runs in the cloud on a Linux box. And what I realized then is that means that I have access to whatever I can do in a Linux shell, right? So
interesting.
yeah, so this workflow, it gets access to everything inside of this GitHub repository and access to the context of what I'm checking in and the file content. I mean, all of that. And then I can, by using YAML, I can, whatever you would think about doing in a Linux shell, I can do in here. So let's say that I wanted to parse out comments from a file. Just don't even think GitHub Actions. Just think in a shell. Well, there is tons of tools that lets me, regex and grep tools that I can use to get to that specific content, and I can do all of that inside of here. So that really, like when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, this is awesome. Like
nice.
I can do pretty much anything I want in here. So what I did is I went through, and by the way, if anyone is interested in this, feel free to visit the Supreme Octa Fiesta. It's a public repo, and you can find this file in there. But what I did here is I went through and I started to play around a little bit with these different steps and trying to figure out how to get to like GitHub metadata. That's what I'm doing here. All of these like GitHub actor, GitHub SHA. This is getting the commit message. And down here, this is where I'm using curl commands to interact with Coda. So all of this I got from just looking at the Coda API docs. And I have a couple of commands where I'm just listing tables. And then this right here is the ID for the specific table that I'm working with to get the columns.
How did you get that ID? Did you have to go into Coda and look that up?
So what I did is, you'll see that in a bit, but when I execute that first curl command, it lists all the tables with the ID. So that's how
I see. Gotcha.
Yeah. And if we scroll down a little bit here, eventually down here, this curl command here, this is where I'm saying, okay, I now would like to insert a row into that table. So this is the doc ID, this is the table ID, And then I'm this is the payload of that post request. I'm inserting a row, and here are the values, right? So right now I just the SHA, and then over on the right there is going to be the actor is the user, and then there's going to be eventually over there's going to be the commit message.
I see.
And again, I wanted to try this out just to kind of get the proof of concept going. So by the way, while I'm talking here, let's zoom out here real quick, and let's see what happens if I were to go back here, and let's add a file. So we'll say test.txt, and we'll say hello, and we'll go down here and we'll commit that. So what happens now is as soon as I commit that file, it's going to trigger that action. And I can go in here to actions. There it is. I can click on it, and we can actually see here, it's running. These are the different steps running on that cloud VM. And
Wow.
here is some of the output. So this is where I curled to ask for, give me a list of tables. So you can see, it's a JSON data, right? But there is one of the table IDs,
right,
and 13 commit, etc.
Gotcha.
And then down here is the columns for a particular table. So I got the information from here, and then here is the actual curl request to insert the data. And I also realized that this looks just like if you worked with Azure DevOps, so the Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, that's your thing too.
Yeah, it looks. So I wonder. I think that it's. Now since Microsoft, purchased GitHub, I wonder if it's using the same sort of infrastructure in the back end to make this happen. So that runs, and if I go back now and I look in here, and same as what you mentioned before, in order for it to show up here, I need to refresh, the grid or the page for that.
I did notice that it doesn't automatically just show up on the page, so you have to refresh the page. But there it is, nice.
Yeah, the bottom, it's just the same thing over and over again in terms of the message. But this is it. This is it right here.
Gotcha.
So, so this here is completely doable to add just a few more of these steps where we use a regex or some way of some pattern matching to look for specific sections in the code for comments specifically, right? And then extract that, and then figure out a way to, if we know that we can get that, we can put it into Coda. Really what I need to start figuring out is like, how do you present it in Coda, right?
Right, through the API to generate
through the API,
nice looking document of some sort.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And the GitHub Actions. So if I go back here, you can see I've ran this like, I don't know, number of times, right? And most of these times, it was actually relatively straightforward to get started with because the Coda API docs are pretty good. They're actually really good, I think. They had examples, which helps.
Now, did you when you created the YAML file where you had those curl requests?
Yeah.
Some of them were just because I'm visually dyslexic, so when I see so many curly braces with slashes and quotes and square brackets, man, my brain just blows a fuse or two, which it did when I saw that, like right there at the bottom thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is 2021, man. Like, is it just that you're really good at this and you're so used to it that doesn't even bother you and you know what's going on? Or is there a tool that will plug it in for you?
So there might, so a couple of things. So first of all, this can be made much more readable. The only reason why I have this long like thing here with the payload is because I need to figure out how to do line breaks properly in the YAML.
Oh,
So
oh,
this
it's a
right
YAML
here,
thing.
that
Gotcha.
angle bracket is a way of doing, I forget what, YAML collapsing, what they call it something. I'm not
I see.
well versed enough in YAML. So I was just kind of, let me just see if I can get things to work, and then I'm gonna go on and polish it. So this can be made much more readable.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I mean, it is, yes, it is still gonna be in YAML. And yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily for the faint of heart, but it's one of those things, you know, if it was easy, then everyone would be doing it. So
And if you're a developer and you heard me complain about curly braces and quotes, I'm sorry. It is just my limitation, I guess.
yeah, it's I don't know, you just kind of, I think it's just a matter of having dealt with configuration files and text files and XML and JSON
Right.
for like 20 years. I think I'm just like desensitized to the you know,
The way it's
looking at it.
organized.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So anyways, so the next thing here I'm going to figure out is, well, first of all, I need to figure out how do I get the contents of the file. And there is a
this would be in GitHub Actions, right? Like, because you have access to the VM.
Exact. Yeah, in
Part
GitHub.
of the script, you
Exactly.
can
Yeah.
parse the files and
Yes, it's going to be in GitHub Actions. So that's I was working on this before we get started here. So so GitHub has, you know, really good documentation about actions. And what I'm looking at here, we have all of these different contexts that you can get access to. And I was kind of digging through here, and I'm guessing that in one of these different contexts, this is where I'm going to be able to get to the file that was checked in, and then be able to get its content so that I can parse out and just get the comments, and then generate a payload, and then push
Gotcha.
that into Coda.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dude, this is awesome. So definitely the GitHub Actions route totally gets you to your end goal, which is not just running an action that connects A to B, but going further, and you could do anything because you just have access to that Linux VM. You could write anything you want, do whatever you want there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the world is your oyster, as they say. Hey, you can do anything.
Nice. Yeah.
So that opened up a whole, I mean, when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, I mean, I can do whatever I want in here. So
right.
This is just a matter of kind of figuring out how to get the different pieces to fit together. I know that it's doable now, and figure out how to present it inside of Coda. You know, just put in a little bit more work, and I think that next time we can have something that is a bit more polished and actually showing the comments.
Nice.
The other thing too is that, you know, figuring out, I mean, obviously different languages have different ways of dealing with comments. I mean, the you know, the double forward slashes, slash asterisk, that's a pretty common way of commenting across, you know, Java, C#, JavaScript, etc. So I'll probably start with that first, but then figure out a clever way where you can, I mean, another thing too is that GitHub can recognize the contents of a file. So maybe you can ask, hey, what type of file is this? And then based on if it's, you know, JavaScript or Python, etc., I can pick a particular regex to parse out the comments for that type of file.
Right. And you're not just parsing comments or like regular comments. I know some of the languages have more of like the documentation style commenting.
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm going to do that too. But the thing is, though, and this is just how I work, it's pretty rare that I put in like the special comment syntax. in
Yeah,
documentation. At least for me personally, I tend to stick with
gotcha.
the sort of the I don't know what like general comments or normal comments,
Totally.
whatever you want to call it. So I'll start with that first. But yeah, I mean, once I figured out how to do it with a type of comment, then I can just replicate that with any type of comment.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. This
Yeah.
is cool. And to zoom out just a little bit, we saw that in this day and age, there's so many different ways you can connect applications now, right? And while there's a no code wave, sometimes if you have someone code savvy on the team, you can actually get by one just getting more done, right? Like you can have more of an elaborate tool there rather than just the whatever that platform gives you, right? Yeah, and but I just love Coda in terms of it looks like such a powerful tool.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
and GitHub has come such a long way, and they just keep adding new features like actions. That's pretty neat.
It is neat, and there are some limitations on the free account, but it's not like you only get like 100 apps a month. It's pretty generous. I mean, it is plenty enough for what we are doing, right?
Right, right. And I'm guessing like Microsoft behind the scenes is running those VMs in somewhere in Azure.
That would be my guess. Yeah.
That's my guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're paying for it because they love developers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take. I mean, there's some shared infrastructure, right? I mean, I'm sure they can run like a bazillion shell instances on one of these
Yeah.
VMs, right? So
Yeah.
it does. I don't think it takes up that much resources.
And yeah, and it's such an awesome tool. I mean, Git itself. One of these days, I want to talk about how I'm using Git to create a personal knowledge management system with
Yeah.
Obsidian, which is like yet another new thing that's come out that is taking the world by storm in some ways for content creators and researchers. But you can hook it up with Git, and all your data is saved in the cloud and backed up and synced up with other devices.
Yeah.
Just using a free GitHub account. It's so powerful if you know how to use it. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I think that covers it, right?
I think we're done.
We're done.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for checking out another episode. We were gone for a while, but you know, it was winter and it was cold, and
We got busy.
We got busy and lazy.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're back.
Awesome.
Awesome. Take it easy, guys, and
Peace.
peace out.